Well, all of this problem started with this book. It didn't really start, but it became kind of more commonly accepted. A lot of people said the same thing before. Charles Darwin, whose parents were good Christian preachers, wrote a book that we didn't come from God, we evolved by natural selection.
I heard that Darwin didn't come up with that it was his father.
No, it wasn't his father. It was, but there were other people that said the same things before. He just made it. It was just better accepted. Maybe wrote a better book. I don't know. In his Darwin believed that natural selection would select for the survival of the fittest. So if you have two animals that are exactly alike, except one of them has a better trait that helps him handle life and beats up on the other animals the same kind. He gets to have sex with more people and he populates more and the other one dies off. So the first thing is the survival of the fittest. The second point in his book, and later on too, is that, well anyway, the other point I want to make, although natural selection might select the fittest, it doesn't cause something to be more fit. So his initial idea on what was more fit, how it became more fit, is that if you used a lot, like if you lifted weights all your life, your children would be stronger. Or if you ran all the time, your children would be healthier. Or if you ate well, your children would be, that could be, well, they disproved that, so it wasn't true. Okay? But even though he wrote to his cousin that he thought this use and misuse attribute more and more evolution to such agency. Well, when they proved that didn't work, they had to come up with a whole different doctrine. So, if you just read his book is false. It's been proved false. Even the evolutionists believe it's false because it's just not true. So they had to come up with what's called neo, which just means new, Darwinism. So, and this time, the way you became more fitter was random mutations. Okay? There's random mutations, and random mutation would make somebody that's bigger and stronger and taller, and that would, and then natural selection, survival of the fittest, would then select the one that's more fit. Well, and we've really accepted this idea really well. That's why there's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and X-Men and all these things, you know. And his idea was that, neo-Darwinism's random mutations create new species, or the Bible word for that is new kinds, over time, and natural selection eliminates the ones that aren't quite as good, leaving the better, more evolved species. So that's neo-Darwinism. So the first week we talked about that, and talked about there's 7 fundamental planks of evolution. One is the universe either popped into existence spontaneously, or has always been. There's always been a universe, okay? And then the next thing is abiogenesis. The law of biogenesis is life can only come from life. So at first there was not life, so life came from non-life. Well, that's a big one. That's okay. The third one is that there's macroevolution. Now we talked about microevolution. That's like a rabbit turns white and he lives a little better in the Arctic, but the same white rabbit in Kay County was probably more likely to get killed because he stands out, it's really easy to shoot, or for the wolf to find, or I guess the dog, or the coyote, or the fox, or my cat. Mutations are the mechanism for macro evolution. Human and apes have a common ancestor, and uniformitarianism is that all things have always been the same. And that's where you get, they use that to prove all sorts of stuff. But you can also use that same idea to disprove a lot what we said, and we've done that a little bit too. And then the universe and life are very old. Billions of years. Okay. And if biblical creation is the universe was created by God, life was created by God, all present kinds were created by God in the first 6 days and have remained constant since creation. Microevolution accounts for small changes but never a new kind. Human and apes have a separate ancestry. In other words, God didn't make man from ape, but he made him from the dust of the ground. And catastrophism, which is, there's two unusual momental things that happen, the creation and the flood. Okay? That explains pretty much the fossils and everything else. And the last point is the universe and life are relatively young. So just to summarize those right here, God made life. I don't believe that there's been any macroevolution. I believe evolution by mutations is impossible. There's no link to apes and humans, and God created and God sent a flood, and that pretty much explains the fossil record. And the Earth's very young. Okay, week 2 we talked about what the Bible says. And in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And the earth was formless and void, and darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God is moving over the surface. So we start out with water, and it's kind of formless and void. And then on day 1 he made light, on day 2 he made sky, day 3 he made the lands and the plants, day 4 he made sun, moon, stars, day 5 he made birds and fishes, and day 6 he made animals and man, and day 7 he rested. Now there's some people who sort of believe in evolution and sort of believe in the Bible. They kind of, that's normal. We try to, and I tried that, I believed in the Bible for a long time. When I was struck with all this evolution, I kind of, does that make sense? So, no, it doesn't. But the two theories that people use the most is the gap theory. That's what it's called. And that there's a big gap of millions or billions of years between verse 1 and verse 2 of the Bible. Okay? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And the earth was formless and void, is verse 2. And in between there, God made a world, and then he destroyed it with water, and at the end we had the water in verse 2. And all the fossils that are old were laid down in the first time he made the heaven and the earth. Millions and billions of years before he made the second one. Okay? And the other theory that some Christians who believe in evolution say is each day of creation doesn't stand for a day of 24 hours, but of millions or billions of years. So we talked about the problems with, first of all, the gap theory between verse 1 and verse 2. The Bible says clearly Adam was the first man. And it also says that he was made in the beginning. Very same word, at least in the English, that is in verse 1. It says, in the beginning God made. Here he says, in the beginning God made Adam. Okay? So to me that just kind of punts the gap theory completely out of the water. And then the second thing, another day theory, God knew that we would come up with this idea, so he added something extra when he did it. On every one of these days he says there was evening and morning the first day, evening and morning the second day, so that we wouldn't say this. Because every time the word evening and morning is used in the Bible, it always refers to 24 hours, 100% of the time. The other problem with the day theory is when God instituted the Sabbath day, which was one of the big 10 commandments that God spoke aloud. He spoke this aloud from Mount Sinai, all of this. And he says, you need to rest today just like I rested today after I worked for 6 days. So you work 6 days just like me, and then you rest. So to me that says he's saying that it just took him a day to make light. Do you think it took him 1,000,000 years to make the sky? No. Okay, so that's the other problem. And then there's a problem with both of them. There wasn't any death until Adam. Paul says that real clearly. For since by a man, Adam, came death, by a man also came Jesus, came the resurrection of the dead. Therefore, as through one man, Adam, sin entered in the world, and death through sin, so death spread to all men, because all died. So no death means there's no fossils until after Adam sinned, which means you don't have dinosaurs before man, or any other animal any more than, I don't think anything died in the Garden of Eden, but it might have. I don't think anything died until Adam sinned, because that's what it says here. So that's a problem with both of them. And then here's a statement by,
Everything died in the Garden of Eden.
not till Adam sinned, is what I'm saying.
During the flood.
Yeah. And then this thought, I agree with this thought. The only reason anyone would even come up with these ideas about days being anything was days was because they believed in evolution. They believed the earth was old. The earth is not old. Earth is 6,000 some years old. And then the other thing in the Bible is the flood of Noah. There was a flood of Noah. It's in well, that's an exaggeration. It's in most of the old societies. They have a story about a universal flood, including the Bible. And it killed everything that wasn't on the ark. At least everything that had breath in it. Didn't kill all the fishes. Killed a lot of them. There's all this mud flowing around, but okay. And so all the men and animals and creeping things and birds of the sky were blotted out on the flood of Noah. So the way they interpret the geological column is not this over here that is millions of years old, but it's these things were laid down in the early part of the flood. These were laid down the later part of the flood, and there's probably a few fossils that were laid down after the flood. So that's what we studied in week 2. Any questions so far? Am I going too fast, Llewellyn? Want me to slow down a little bit?
No, you're okay.
Wait a minute, we got a question here first.
On that top line there where there's beast and all that, are there human fossils, human remains in that period?
What are you talking, which period?
Like the flood? The top line up there that's got the mammoth and the... I can't see.
In the fossil record, which is, which the evolutionary claim was a long time ago, okay? The men tend to be up at the top part of it because humans lasted a little longer in the flood.
Okay, are they actually finding human remains or human fossils?
Yeah, but they're up here.
Okay.
They're not down here. There's no human fossils down here
Okay.
because they tend to last a little longer in a flood.
I just didn't know if there were fossils from that far back or not.
Yeah, we have fossils all the way down here.
No, I asked.
Okay. Yeah. I don't think that they found any. If they are, they're keeping real quiet about it. Okay. Because
known to do that.
yeah, because I showed you some footprints. Remember the footprints? They were clear back in here. Footprints here and here, but not bones. Okay. That's a great question. I don't know the answer to it great, but it's a great question. Yes, Terry?
I forget what you call them, but the group that says that each biblical day was
Day theory.
years.
Day theory.
Okay. And you said it's because they believe in evolution. But doesn't that mean also they believe in the Bible because they're trying to
Right. They're
trying to merge them and explain the discrepancies?
And they say that, here's God trying to explain to these people, and they just couldn't fathom millions of years.
Right.
So he says it was just one time period he made this. And my answer to that is I can explain to a 4-year-old, and these were people, Moses was pretty smart, had the best education in the world probably. So,
The oil comes from, Ron?
what?
Oil, where did that come from?
It comes from, mainly from trees, a lot of it bark, and it's pressurized.
Right.
The point I made about oil was that all oil has carbon-14 in it, which means it's not over about 50,000 years old at the oldest. Because it shouldn't have, if it was 100,000 years old, it wouldn't have any carbon-14. It has a bunch of it.
But the water's rising time, it wouldn't be enough time for all those, the great oil.
Yes, it was. In fact, there's been some coal produced. It's, again, you see, you bury a huge amount of organic material in the flood, right? and then you start putting stuff on top of it, and more layers, and more, and that's a lot of pressure. So it's just the perfect conditions to form oil. That's
No, I think,
a great question. I don't know that I answered it well either.
Do you think there was more gravity back then than there is now?
No, I don't. Yes.
I think we've read that maybe with John Clayton, that the oil was formed from dinosaur bones, fossils.
Well, fossils, but not dinosaurs specifically. It's probably more plant than animal, but he's right that it's organic. That's what the word organic means. There's two types of organic, plants and animals, and most people think it was more the plant, but organic material, you press it hard for a long time and it turns into oil and coal.
There's a lot of people that say the term fossil fuels is a misnomer because from beds of plankton, any kind of growing life under pressure and whatever will turn into petroleum.
There's not a lot of fossils in petroleum, but there is some in coal. But okay, week 3. This is my favorite, one of my favorite. Actually, my favorite's week 2. But my week 3 is the earth is young. Now, that's a pretty. I remember he was sitting right back in front of where Llewellyn said. He got so mad at this when he got up and left. Not this time, but the first time. The earth is 6,000 some years old. Maybe 10,000 if you want to argue. I wouldn't argue with that. But it's not 20,000. It's not 50,000. Not a million years old. The earth's young. And why is believing that important? I told that to my sister. My sister wanted to argue, well, that's not worth talking about. Well, here's a evolutionist says that all he's got to do is convince them that the earth is very old. And if that's true, then believing the Bible literally is a dead duck. Because it says 6 days. And so here's a timeline according to the Bible. And I went through how you figure it out, but you can add it up yourself. It's pretty easy to do. I mean, this is mine, by the way. I didn't even look and check what other people believe. Yeah, I just did it from reading the Bible through. And from creation to the flood was 1,650 years. And then Isaac was 400 years later. Exodus was 400 years later. The temple was 500, actually 480, but I rounded, okay. The temple was 500 years later. The temple was destroyed 500 years later, and from the time that the temple was destroyed till Jesus was born was 600 years, and since it's 2025 today, that's 6,075 years. Okay? There's 14 evidences, scientific evidences of a young earth. 14. There's hundreds, okay? But I just mentioned the 14 I like the best. Jerry probably has another one he likes. I think Steve mentioned that maybe he liked the pressure in oil wells. You could make a point that there shouldn't be any pressure in oil wells after a million years anyway. But okay, but I didn't put that in here. There's the sediment on the sea floor. All the sediments going in all the time from all the rivers, and only a little bit goes up. So it's all, and if you started out with no sediment at all on the sea floor, it would be over your head everywhere if the earth was a million years old. Salt in the sea, same thing. The distance from the earth to the moon is increasing, which means if you go backwards, it used to be closer. When you get very close to the earth, it starts messing things up. I mean, the tides would be so high, you'd have to live very halfway in between the two oceans to be alive, and then go further back, it hit. And so that's, and then we talked about this last week, the human DNA is deteriorating. And if you just go back a few years, if the earth was a million years old, your DNA would be shot. Even with the built-in cell repair mechanism. And then there's all this dinosaur art that's of people before we ever dug any dinosaurs up. And they look just like the dinosaurs. So that means these people saw the dinosaurs. So dinosaurs and man lived at the same time.
Carved in stone in numerous locations.
Yeah,
Exact representation.
we showed some of those. I started to show those, but I didn't think we'd have any chance for questions if I showed too many more slides. The oldest trees in the world, you can count the rings on them, are about the age that we're saying, 6,000. And they're probably here. God probably created them on the... Yes?
The olive trees in Israel, they say, are about 4,000 years old.
Well, the oldest tree of all is the bristle-toed pine, and it's a little older than that, but it's about the age that I think the Earth is. The Earth's magnetic field is decaying. Now, the way the evolutionists handle that is they say, well, it decays and it gets stronger and decays. Well, there's no evidence it ever gets stronger. That's just how can you even fathom that, knowing what causes the magnet? Well, okay, helium in the atmosphere. There's so much helium going up in the atmosphere all the time, and it never goes anywhere because it's not reactive, and there's not enough there. I mean, if the Earth was 1 million years old, there'd be a whole bunch more helium. And then we talked about, that's a little complicated, zircon crystals. There's a whole bunch of helium in these zircon crystals, and that proves that they're not very old. It also proves that pretty much that at one time the radioactive rock decayed a lot quicker. Otherwise you couldn't get that much in there. It's just... And then we talked about C14. C14 has a real short half-life. So if there's C14 in something, and there is C14 in every fossil you dig up, by the way, everything that was once alive, then it can't be very old. Maybe, you can measure that and say it's over 6,000 years old, but again, I think it was accelerated at one time, but it pretty much rules out it being 100,000 years old or even 50. DNA intact in supposedly ancient we talked about a bacteria that was supposed to be 250,000 years old, DNA in a dinosaur that's supposed to be gone 65 million years ago, and DNA in a magnolia leaf that's supposed to be 200 million years old. And DNA only lasts 10,000 years max. Okay? And then we talked about red blood cells in dinosaurs. I showed you the picture. Remember the picture of the bone, dinosaur bone? And then we talked about human footprints in rock layers that were supposed to be 250 million years old. Okay. Now, scientists will say, well, we know the Earth's old because of radioactive dating. It's accurate. Well, it's not accurate at all. And just to show us how, here's a volcano in New Zealand. And this is one that you may be more familiar with, because this is the United States, Mount St. Helens. Well, they took rocks that they knew were around 50 years old from this volcano in New Zealand, and they dated it the same labs that they're dating these rocks to tell you that dinosaurs were gone 65 million years ago. And they're 50 years old, and they dated them anywhere between 250,000 years and 3.5 million years. That's mighty inaccurate. Okay? And St. Helens was 35 years old, and they dated it to 2.8 million years old. So it's not worth changing your belief about. 90% of the ways to date things, and that's conservative estimate. I think it's a lot higher than that. If you want to date how old the Earth is, at least 9 out of 10 say it's really, really young. Too young to even consider evolution. So why would a Christian who believes in the Bible take man's fallible methods of dating the Earth instead of God's? The Bible's pretty clear. It doesn't say Adam, it tells you exactly how long Adam lived before he had his first boy, and how long that boy lived before he had his, and you can date, come around 6,000 years. So I believe the Bible is a really, really good book, and it's very, very true. And it's much more true. And again, I love science. I really, really got off in science. I went to scholastic meets in science. I mean, I wasn't, just because I was a doctor, I fell in love with science a long time before I even got out of high school. And And I think there's a lot of truth there, but we're not talking about science when we're talking about how old the earth is. We're talking about history. And there was somebody who was there and wrote it down. Yes.
What is radioactive dating? Is that a machine, X-ray, or what?
Okay. The idea of radioactive dating is you have some radioactive rocks, okay, like uranium, and they decay at a certain rate. And you can measure the rate that they decay at, okay? And then you figure out one time, and so you try to figure out the date from that. There's a problem with it. The only thing you can really measure accurately is how much of it is decayed and how fast it's decaying. You can't really figure out how much it decayed in the past. See, that's where the uniformitarianism comes in. It's always been the same rate. And I concur. That's why I talked about the helium and zircon crystals. At one time in the past, I believe that the radioactive rate was a lot faster. And the other thing John says, which is true, is it started out, God made a mature rock. It already had some of the decay gone, in other words. So you take those two things. I think there was an accelerated decay at the time of the flood and at the time of creation. So again, that's what they... Okay, now, I say that. The dates on all those charts I showed you were not made by radioactive dating. They were made by Darwin and his colleagues long before they had radio. They just tried to figure out how long it would take something to evolve from a amoeba to a human. Okay? And how long from an ape to a human. So they made the apes older than the humans, and they dated all the rocks by their evolutionary theory. So the dates on those are from theories, not from facts. And then when they discovered radioactive dating of rocks, they used it to make their claims sound more scientific. Now, I would like to mention that they never date the rock that the fossil's in. You know why that is? Because it's sedimentary rock. Okay? And you can't date a sedimentary rock. The only rock you can date is a igneous, which means it comes from a volcano. So they date their igneous rocks close to them, and we just got through showing you how inaccurate the igneous rock dating is.
Granite would be igneous,
Yeah.
and limestone
Sandstone.
and sandstone would be sedimentary.
That's right. Good. Okay, we're ready for week 4.
Now you're talking about the infallible Word of God.
Yes.
There is no deception in God.
Amen. God wouldn't say days. That's deceiving. It's either thinking you're absolutely stupid or he's trying to deceive you, and God doesn't do that.
And when he made an old rock, he wasn't trying to deceive anybody.
No, he wasn't trying to
Who did
deceive.
he say that to? Who did he say it to that then wrote Exodus? After
Moses.
okay, that
Moses,
director Moses.
who was one of the most educated men in the world.
Okay,
He was educated in probably the greatest seat of education, Egypt, and he grew up in Pharaoh's household.
Okay, I may be a dead duck.
That's all right.
In
I
the
love-
beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, specifically the earth. Could the universe not be older than 6,000 years then?
Yes, yes. I believe the stars are 6,000 some years old too. He made them in the beginning, made them at the same time.
It doesn't say that. It says he made the heavens, that's right up there, and the earth is us.
Well, actually,
If he was specific on the day, would he not have been specific on the universe rather than the earth?
okay, the word heavens has 3 meanings. It means the sky, it means the atmosphere, and it means where God lives. So you could say that he's just talking about the sky, but he really didn't make the sky until day 2. And he didn't make the stars and moon and sun until day 4. So what did he make in the beginning? Again, I believe that verse 1, you don't have to agree with this, it's not important. He's introducing his chapter. He's introducing his first 3 chapters. it's like, it's the way I talk, it's the way we all talk. You know, we go, God made everything, and here's how he did it. You know, so I think that's what verse 1 means. It means, in the beginning God made it, and this is how he did it. So I don't think it means that he made the heavens. Well, I don't think that verse means that he made the heavens before he made Adam, but verses, you know, he tells you when he made, fourth day he made the heavens, the stars, moons, and the sun, and then the sixth day he made Adam. So that's the best I can handle that, I think. Maybe someone else has a better answer for her question than I did.
So the Earth is actually a couple of days older than all the galaxies and stars and whatnot.
No, they made, again, I think verse 1 is just an introduction. You know, you've heard introductions.
Yeah, but you said the fourth day is when he made them.
The sun, moon, stars.
Okay, so that would mean,
Yeah.
by definition, the Earth would be a couple of days older than those.
Yes, I think that's true. He made light, and I think the light was separated on day 4. There was light before there was sun, moon, stars, so we think a light has to come from the sun, but you know, he first made a big blob of light, and I think it boiled the water,
No,
made
God,
the sky.
you can do anything you want.
Yeah, you can do it any way you want. Okay, then we're going to get the laws of thermodynamics, and just the first two. I didn't go into the third one. First one is energy cannot be created or destroyed. And you know, you have to think about that one a while. When you have a fire, you're not creating any or destroying any matter, and you're not creating or destroying any energy. Was there as potential energy in the wood, and if you measure all the energies at the end of the experiment or thermodynamic reaction, it's the same, and the matter is the same too. Now there is one difference, is that Einstein figured this out. Matter is a form of potential energy by the equation E equals mc squared, which c squared is a really big number, which is why atomic bombs have so much power, because you burn up a little bit of matter and make a whole bunch of energy, but the total energy before and after is the same, and that's the first law of thermodynamics. So if you think about that a while, if energy can't be created or destroyed, and it hasn't ever been created and destroyed, where'd it come from? Well, there's kind of two theories. It's always been there, or God made it. And the Bible says God made it. But evolution, on the other hand, involves millions of violations of the first law of thermodynamics, because you have to put energy into stuff to make it get better. And the second law of thermodynamics, so God made everything in 6 days, and nothing has been created since the 6th day. No new mass and no new energy, which is what the first law of thermodynamics says. And the second law is that every chemical reaction, every thermodynamic process, whether it's running your car or burning up your house or whatever, or putting two chemicals together, at the end of a natural thermodynamic process, which I guess running your car isn't exactly natural, but you know, the entropies of all the participating bodies is increasing. Entropy means a measured disorder. In other words, if you have a natural reaction that man's not controlling, at the end, it's less orderly, more entropy. You got that? Entropy is a new word you don't use all the time. You don't talk about entropy around the breakfast table. Yes?
Could we say in a different way, it's always in a constant state of decay?
Yeah, that's what entropy means, decay or disorder. The reason they use the word, scientists use the word entropy, you can kind of measure it. Decay is a little harder to, okay? So it states that in the disorderliness is increasing. I did have some pictures. This is a house. It used to be a really nice house. The person who built that thought it was really nice when they built it, but they quit taking care of it. If you quit taking care of your car, what happens? Quit taking care of your wife. What? No, that's not good. If you quit taking care of your clothes, what happens? If you take care of that's just the way of things. There's lots of energy coming down from the sun, but that doesn't make it more orderly. It makes you think, I like this. When you drop an egg, all of a sudden the entropy of that thing. Now you could put it back together, but it takes a lot of information and hard work and glue and paper towels, and it's probably, even after you do that, its entropy's probably increased. I was going to show a picture of Becca's breakfast casserole. You can put a lot of information and effort into that egg, and you can come up with something more orderly, more organized, but I didn't. I didn't want to embarrass her, so I did anyway. For something to go the other way, you have to do two things. Energy and information or skill or orderliness. So you have to do information and energy. And without that, things become, again, putting it out in the sun isn't going to make it more orderly. It's still going to, that house we showed was out in the sun, you know. So it takes energy and for information. Here you got the way my room looked like when I was a boy growing up. In fact, I got over that, and then my brother wasn't, so I still feel kind of bad about Gary not cleaning up doing his part to keep the room clean. I hurt him. I don't think he's ever forgiven me. No, that's probably not right. He probably has. Okay, I've done things since then. It makes him hard. But you have to, you can have the sunshine on that. Turn on the lights in the house, and it's not going to fix it, is it? It takes somebody working, energy, but also he's got to know where to put stuff. You know, if you just sweep around randomly, it's not going to get any more orderly. It's not going to look like that. So you have to have information, not just energy. Here's a car burning. You know, and you know, cars run on energy, and the energy makes it go, right? But to say that you pour gasoline on the car and set a fire, it doesn't run down the road. It doesn't get you to South Carolina. It doesn't get you home. You have to have information and orderliness, and you have to harness it via the engine. And so all things naturally tend to become more disorderly or greater entropy. That's the second law of thermodynamics. The theory of evolution requires millions, probably billions of reactions that violate one of the most fundamental laws of science. And only with the application of energy and intelligence can anything become more orderly. Again, God. God made things orderly. God made man more evolved, that's the wrong word, more fit than a monkey or a cat or an amoeba. Here's another thought. If you go backwards, okay, things are becoming more disorderly, okay? So if the Earth's 1 million years old, there wouldn't be any orderliness left. Even if God created it, if things have always been the way they are now, then we would not have anything that would work. We still use heat engines, and there's still biological systems that operate today. That reveals that the universe is far from its maximum disorderly state. Therefore, the Earth is not eternal. It's not even millions of years old.
Are you saying that God cannot cancel the laws of thermodynamics?
Yeah, you absolutely can.
Okay, that would be.
But their whole theory is things are just uniformitism. Things are just like they've always been.
So he put them there for a reason, and we don't need to know what it is. Is that kind of...
Well, what I was saying, if God created the heavens and the earth 1 million years ago, and at the same time created the second law of thermodynamics, we wouldn't be in a very orderly world. We'd be in huge disorder.
So it's something he created at a later time?
Well, he created it at the same time. He just created it 6,000 years ago instead of 1 million.
Okay.
I don't know that I answered that question very well either. I certainly wasn't making light of the question.
No, I didn't take it
I
that.
love the questions, by the way. Just interrupt me. So, matter was originally disorganized in verse 1, or verse 2. The earth was formless and void, and darkness was over. There was no light. It was formless, and that's pretty disorganized, I would say. Okay? And then, after the sixth day, God said, it's very good. So, it went from disorderly to very orderly, and since that time it's been going the other way around. So,
So, Ron,
Yes.
do you think God would have created anything disorderly?
no, he
He's a
didn't.
spirit of order.
I agree.
Why would
I'm
you
agree.
say that?
No, what did it? What? No, I said God made everything very orderly.
It was formless.
In the beginning.
On the sixth day, he said it was very, very good. I think that's a description of very, very orderly.
Yes.
I'm agreeing with you.
Before that. Earth was formless and void. That seems a little strange.
Well, it's just getting started.
Okay.
It's like making fun of when old Junior's building a house. You go out and look at the sticks and say, "This is very disorderly. What are you doing? You don't know what you're doing."
It wasn't put together or something.
He didn't put it together in an instant. It took him 6 days.
So,
Good question. I didn't get your question at first. Didn't go.
so, if there was a Big Bang, then, because science has no idea, they don't even have any theories about what would have caused that. So that would have been the very first thing that God did, is that if there was a Big Bang, does that make sense?
I don't think.
It didn't happen that way.
I think the Big Bang is wonderful. It's just saying it had a start and it was a lot of power.
Exactly. It was the starting point.
I think
of
the Big
everything.
Bang was actually day 1. Let there be light. That was a Big Bang.
Well, yeah, that would make sense.
Yeah.
I'm back on the
I'm sorry.
universe, but
Okay.
not an arguing thing. I think that is one of the most orderly things that God did.
All right.
I've been reading a little bit, because that was Les's thing. And
Yes.
how just the tiniest little bit, something was off, or a chemical was a slight bit different, it wouldn't be what it is.
Amen. He knew what he was doing. And stuff we're just now figuring out 6,000 years after he did it. You okay, Bill?
Oh, yes.
She was worried about you. Okay.
I'm fine, thank you. I'm listening.
I think I'm boring him.
No.
Okay, and then the Bible also states that the world is becoming more disorderly.
Amen.
They will perish. They will wear out.
Sort of like that, right.
Like I'm wearing out. Lynn's not wearing out, though. He looks younger now than when he moved here.
Well, if it wasn't orderly, we wouldn't be able to figure out the timetable of, well, you can see Venus at this time,
Yeah,
and you can see
yeah.
the moon and when it makes its rotation. You can tell how far you are from the sun. There's an order to everything.
Amen.
Gravity.
Amen.
And
Things
Jesus
like
is
that.
the one that
It's constant.
holds everything in order.
Jesus holds everything in order and keeps it orderly. And that's why I love science so much early on, because it's just studying how orderly God is. And you can figure things out about how he said, okay, this is the father of thermodynamics. We've been studying the first and second. This guy's the most famous guy in the world in thermodynamics. His name's Kelvin. And he said, it's what we get the Kelvin temperature scale from, science positively affirms creative power. You got two choices. You can believe in a scientific belief in a creative power named God, Father, or the acceptance of the theory of a fortuitous concourse of atoms. Those are not the words I would use, but you get the idea. Okay, week 5. That was 4 weeks ago. The results of believing in homosexuality, the Bible states very clearly that because they didn't believe he created the heavens and the earth, he gave them over to homosexuality. That's what that says. God sort of made them, or led them, maybe led them. And that's true. If you don't believe in creation, a certain percentage of your society is going to be homosexuals. If you do believe in creation, there'll be very little. So that's what God said, and that's what happened in this country. And then there's all sorts of other evils that happen because they didn't believe and give God the honor, and everything from unrighteousness, wickedness, greed, evil, envy, murder, strife, deceit, malice, gossip, hate, slanders, haters of God, insolent, arrogant, boastful, inventors of evil, disobedient to parents, without understanding, untrustworthy, unloving, unmerciful. And I thought this was, because that's the biggest change in my lifetime, hearty approval. I mean, there's people who heartily approve of homosexuality and all these things. They think it's wonderful. They approve of it.
It's getting worse.
Yeah, it's getting worse. So that's the first step. Okay, that's from Romans. But Hitler was from evolution. You know, the gas chambers, then they burned them, cremated them after they killed them. Darwin's evolutionary ethics drove Hitler to engage in behavior that we consider abominable.
That was the whole eugenics movement, which started in America at the Cold Springs Harbor Institute in New York.
Again, it's evolution too. It's eugenics and evolution are kind of related. Eugenics is just we need to give evolution a little boost.
Yeah.
We need to help it out by killing people that aren't.
In the human race. Is how-
We kill everybody who has an IQ under 90. Whatever, Hitler wanted big, strong, hardy Aryans to have as many children as possible, and the Jews did not have any. And then Stalin was the same way. It's different political system, but the net results were the same. And Stalin did it because of evolution. And then there's some murderers that said that they did it because they believed in evolution. And I mentioned three of them: Jeffrey Dahmer, Eric Alvanen, and Pekka Eric Alvanen said this: "It's time to put natural selection, survival of the fittest back on track. I'm prepared to fight and die for my cause. I will be a natural selector, will eliminate all who I see unfit or disgraces of the human race and failures of natural selection." That's this guy. And Will Cornick murdered his teacher for basically the same reason. It's instinctual, it's human. Killing is a root of survival. It's kill or be killed. I didn't have a choice, either kill her or kill myself. So how do you build a bomb? Tell people there's no absolutes, life's an accident, people are evolved animals. And millions of years of violence, killing, death, disease, pain, and suffering brought humans into existence. See, you can't have evolution unless you kill the bad ones. So, remove the Bible, prayer, and the Ten Commandments from school, and stand back and wait. So, they did studies and stuff. It produces suicide, homosexuality, abortion, rape, euthanasia, murder, and a bunch of other stuff. Okay? Hopelessness. That was week 5. Week 6, the fossil record. And there's basically two things I want you to remember about the fossil record. One is the Cambrian explosion, and the second one is no transitional fossils. Probably better to say lack of transitional fossils, so you won't be like a know-it-all. Here's the layers that they still put in books, and here's the Cambrian down here. Very oldest one that's got anything other than, there's just almost no animals of any kind or life of any kind down here. Cambrian's the first that has any animals at all, except for there's a few soft-bodied worms down there in the pre or Proterozoic, okay? The Cambrian explosion is that there's all sorts of animals in the lowest layer. Almost every phyla of animal, and a lot of species, all sorts of different animals, some of them really complicated. There's no animals, except for a few worms, and then all these other animals with no evolution in between, okay? And this is Charles Darwin in his original book. He recognized it. It says, well, there must be all sorts of layers before the Cambrian stratum. And in fact, there must be more time before Cambrian when things were evolving than has happened since. Well, we've been digging for a long time and we haven't found any layers below the Cambrian that show any transitional fossils. This is Richard Dawkins. It's as though all the animal and plant phyla formed at the beginning of the Cambrian layer. They were just planted there. No evolution before them. They can't explain it. Okay, and of course we can explain it because God made the heaven and earth. It took him 6 days, okay? And then the second one is transitional fossils. This again, we'll quote Darwin. The lack of transitional forms is the most obvious and serious objection which can be urged against the theory of evolution. That's him himself saying that in his original book. Well, there still isn't any. Here's a guy from Harvard who believes in evolution. The extreme rarity of transitional forms in the fossil record persists as the trade secret. They don't tell you about this. So I'm telling you, there aren't any transitional forms. The most famous transitional fossil of all is Archaeopteryx, which was a dinosaur or big lizard becoming a bird. It wasn't a great big dinosaur. Okay? And it was a hoax. It was an absolute forgery. You can prove it. You can prove that he took some cement and put it on a fossil of a lizard. Okay? And they couldn't prove it for a while, so it was in the British Museum of Natural History for years and years and years, and it's still in the textbooks, looking like this. You can just put in Archaeopteryx if you can spell it. It just means old bird. I call people old birds sometimes, but so
The scientists say that birds are the living dinosaurs, that they descended from the dinosaurs.
well, yeah, but this is what it looked like. Not like this at all. It was just one of these. Had no furcula, which is the breastbone where the wings hook. It didn't have any wings, didn't have any feathers. It was just just a lizard. And then this is from Coyle, who's in his book, Why Evolution is True. We've proved it with our whale evolution, the fossil record of whales. And we thought this was kind of funny. You can have the land, the whale says. Well, these are the three that they quote most commonly: Pakicetus, Ambulocetus, and Rhodocetus. Okay? And we even showed pictures of the guy who discovered it. And the first one's Pakicetus, and they thought it was a predecessor to whales, but they now found all of his skeleton and proved it didn't have anything to do with whales. You know, they found an early skeleton that was partial, and then they found a whole one. And then, so it doesn't look a thing like this. This is what was in Science magazine. Looked like this. Pretty much like a big rat. Nothing to do with a whale. And then Amblyocetus, well, they thought it had flippers, fins, tail fluke, blowhole, webs on its front legs and back legs. They never did find a pelvic bone, and they said it had this cheekbone that was like a whale, but all of those are not true. This is how it was portrayed in National Geographic. See, it kind of looks like it might turn into a whale someday. This is what it actually looked like. It's just looked like a little bit like an armadillo. And then the last one is Rhodocetus. It was supposed to be almost whale, you know, and had these a whale tail, and whale flippers. Even some people even poked a blowhole in the top of the skull so it looked like a whale, but it didn't have any of that stuff. It wasn't anything like a whale. Didn't have flippers, didn't have a tail. So again, these were for years. In some places you can still go and see these artificial we're about out of time. So if whale evolution is one of the best examples of evolution, if Archaeopteryx is the most commonly cited transitional fossil, I think maybe you should doubt evolution. Well, really. This is a Luther Sunderland. We've had over 120 years of people trying to prove evolution. We have 100 million fossils, 250,000 different species, all sorts of hard scientific data to prove whether Darwin was right. And what is the picture? Darwin was wrong. There is no evolution. We don't have the transitional fossils that he said if we worked hard we'd find. Okay? Here's Niles Eldridge, who was a famous evolutionist. He said Darwin prophesied that we would fill in these gaps with transitional fossils. And it's abundantly clear that Darwin's prediction is not true. And the problem isn't that it's a poor record. It just shows that it's wrong. The species are amazingly conservative and static through long period of time. Everyone knew it, but we kind of ignored it. And they just look the other way. Because once you get your mind set on something, don't bother me with the facts. Steve talked about that. Don't bother me with the facts. Okay? And there's no real evolutionist. Do you want me to go into gradual and gradual is what Darwin thought. Because it's so obviously false, some people believe that you didn't evolve at all for millions of years and all of a sudden you evolved a whole bunch. And there's no reason to believe that. That's even sillier than the original one. But the fossil record shows that the first one didn't right, so you've got to come up with something else. But they all say that the fossil record gives no evidence in favor of the theory of evolution, as opposed to special creation. And then the other thing, goo, which is the evolution, you start out with this goo and you end up being a human. You should have millions of information adding mutations to generate all the knowledge that's in the human genome, but it's doubtful we've even absorbed one information added. So God created all types in 6 days. Most fossils were laid down in the flood. And we're out of time. Can we go through real quick? Is that okay, Junior? Okay.
Go through it.
Okay. Here's what was in the textbooks when I was growing up. And it's still probably in some. You can still find it on the internet. The Evolution of Man from Lucy. Well, there's Lucy. And she was just a chimpanzee. And small brain, her feet are dwelling in trees, and she's just a chimpanzee. She's not anything else. Okay, I think it's time to stop. I don't know. And then here's the Charles Oxford who says, who doesn't believe in creation. He says all of these Australopithecines, which is Lucy was kind of the first and best known one, they don't have anything to do with the evolution of man. Hindenburg man was just a large jaw. And, it's just a man with a large jaw. Nebraska man was a tooth. And he looked like this, according to the evolutionists. But it's probably this. They found out later, they found the whole skeleton's just a pig, or peccary. Piltdown man was the worst one. He was just a combination of chimpanzee teeth, orangutan teeth. They stained the bones with iron to make them look older. It had a human skull. It was just a complete fabrication. Nowadays, you don't hear about those too much anymore, although you hear about Lucy a little bit. But Neanderthal man. And Neanderthal man were just humans that probably had rickets or some other disease. Or maybe it was just that they lived to be 600, 700, 800 years. How would you look? What do you think Lynn would look like if he was 700 years old? He would look kind of strange. I didn't say I just... Sorry. I shouldn't have said that. So, and then here's Richard Leakey, who doesn't believe in God. He said, if somebody from some other discipline came in and looked at all the stuff that we had to prove that man evolved from apes, he'd say, forget it, there isn't enough to go on. Modern apes have sprung out of nowhere, and humans are even worse. No fossil or other physical evidence directly connects man to ape. And then last week we studied DNA, which just fascinates me. Even the simplest living creature, you have to be alive, you have to have DNA. The simplest living creature has 600,000 bytes of information. That means DNA had to evolve 600,000 bytes of information at the same time, because DNA doesn't last very long. If you just evolved one or two, they would die before you ever got anything made. So it pretty much proves that it couldn't evolve. Yeah, and there's nothing. What happened right before the DNA? It's so complicated. What happened right before it? Well, even one byte of DNA. What was the thing that had before it? What did it evolve from? It didn't. And it decays rapidly, and if it's still around, it's means it's less than 10,000 years old. And there's DNA in magnolia leaves, there's DNA in dinosaurs, and there's DNA in bacteria that are supposed to be 250 million years old. And this guy says, we're getting more and more reports of DNA in these things that are supposed to be real old. And they can't be over 10,000 years old because there can't be any DNA left after 10,000 years. And then we talked about fruit flies. They do all sorts of experimentations to make them mutate, and you get the equivalent of millions of years of mutations. And do they produce something like a mouse? There's all these mutations. They're still all fruit flies, though. They didn't have anything to advance. And then, listen to this. They've been doing... We know all about human DNA, so we can sequence everybody's DNA and see how many problems there's, because sometimes the major problems are easy to see, okay? And human DNA has lots of problems. There's currently more than 141,000 different mutations, 11,000 new ones each year. And of all the mutations, none of them are considered beneficial. In other words, evolution is built on beneficial mutations. Well, these are humans. You can tell how many mutations how many mutations John's DNA's had in his life, but you can also, how many mutations, all the way back to his earliest father, Adam. And, anyway, there's no category of human mutation, even though that's beneficial. They got two. It doesn't kill you, and it makes you sick. It makes you sick, or it's functional. Functional just means it doesn't seem to slow you down too much.
Okay, hold on, I have a question. So you can take John's DNA and go back all the way to Adam?
No, it's just that his DNA came from his father.
Right.
So his father's DNA mutations were passed on to John. And John's grandfather's mutations were passed on to John's father.
Right.
And to John. So you can see how many mutations there was that, again, you probably can't figure out some mutations, but these are definitely, because you can look at the DNA and say it's not right.
Okay.
There's something missing there. There's supposed to be something there.
I'm the only Lucas that has hair.
Yeah, that's probably a mutation. I don't know.
It's a mutation.
Have a mutation?
What?
Does everybody have a mutation?
Everybody has mutations in their DNA. Okay. And this is interesting. It's a lot higher than we thought. Now, that'd be a good thing if we were getting better, but so far none of the mutations have made you better. Some of them doesn't seem to make a lot of difference. Some of them makes you worse. We talked about some of that. Okay? So if we've been evolving for millions of years, we'd be extinct. If humans were made a million years ago, our DNA would be so shot there wouldn't be any humans around. So that's all I had. Yes. This question you're second. Go ahead, you first.
Well, just real quick, having dealt with my atheist friends
Yeah.
and my church friends worry about me, but I think it's wonderful to have conversation.
I do too.
The thing that bothers me about an evolutionary person is they put so much stock in that word science.
Yeah.
It's almost look at us as if they're condescending, they almost hold it themselves. Science is always looking for answers.
Right.
It's never fine. It's always going forward. And the final thought on all this, always to tell the kid, God can do anything he wants.
Amen.
So why limit God?
I don't. Don't limit God. Okay, Bill.
Why is anyone, especially many people organized in some way, trying to convince the rest of us that evolution has to be the way it is? Why? What is their motive?
They don't want to obey God. If there is no God, you don't have to obey Him.
They don't have to obey God. We care, but we have nothing to do with their choice. They don't have to obey God. We choose to obey God.
That's
They
true.
choose not to. That's a free choice. That's not a satisfactory answer, Doc.
I think if you
They want us to be like them.
I think if you ponder on that a while, you'll get it.
Okay.
Guilt. If there is a God, and He spoke, okay, and I'm not doing it, even if you decide I'm not going to do it anyway, there's those feelings of guilt and shame. You know, that's why they think that, you know, suicide rate among homosexuals is pretty high. Well, it's our fault because we make them feel guilty. Well, it's not my fault. I love them. I want them good things for them. But but it started out with Darwin not wanting to obey his parents and his parents' God. And he knew there was a God, so he had to prove there wasn't a God, so he didn't have to obey him. That's where it came from. But now there's probably another answer to your question, okay?
Yeah.
I talked with Candace about this. Candace will ask me some question about the Bible or Christianity. And I hadn't even thought about that in 30 years. I made that decision 30 years ago, and I hadn't even thought about it. I just love it. You do too sometimes. I mean, Saturday mornings do that. I ask me, and I go, why do I believe that? I forgot why I believe that, so I got to go back and find out why I believe it again. Well, it's the same way with these people. They've believed evolution so long, it's fact to them. And it's kind of like arguing with a Baptist preacher about once saved, always saved. He can't think straight about it because he loses his job, he loses his retirement, he loses, if you convince him, so he can't really think straight about it. He can't, and I don't want to make fun of that. It's just an easy doctrine, okay? And I'm not anti that at all. I just, it's like when Terry tells me something that Robert Kennedy said. First of all, it's wrong, but then it makes me angry because it means everything I ever believed in was stupid. No, Kennedy's stupid, not me. I'm right and he's wrong. And he doesn't have any medical education, yet he spouts off these things that are untrue. And so sometimes I stop, and Terry accused me of this, I stop reasoning and I start lambasting. You heard me do that. I don't do that very often. But it's just the way you get a mindset and you got to step back and say, well, is this logical? You lose your reason.
It's all about accountability.
Accountability.
Yeah,
I like that better.
evolutionists don't want to be held accountable.
There's a much simpler and more practical answer to Bill's question. The reason they're pushing this is they want to destroy the concept of God. And they want to do that for political reasons because we either have God-given rights, free speech, etc., or if there's a God, we have those as God-given. If there's no God, and that's what they're pushing,
Yes.
then we don't have any God-given rights. All rights come from the government, and they can give them or take them away.
I have another, thank you. I have another step further. If we can be reduced to animal behavior, we can be managed as livestock.
Yep. That's kind of what he said too. If
Yeah, that's
he was alluding to that.
That's part of it. But to me, that's a much simpler and more practical, real-world
Or
explanation.
another way of saying is, if there is no God, there's no right and wrong.
Yeah.
I can
that's-
manufacture my own right
Yeah.
and wrong.
That's the reason I'm not an atheist anymore.
Of course, we know better, there is right.
Huh?
Satan is the
Satan is the deceiver. That's a great answer too. Satan is the deceiver. He's been doing stuff like this since the garden. Is that what you're going to say, Liz? That's what I said. All right. Great minds think along the same track.
I believe that's so developed.
Every knee will bow and every tongue will confess that Jesus is Lord. Isn't that great? So we don't really have to worry about this, but we want to know what we can do to convince as many people as we can before it's too late, because they are going to bow.
Well, you've used science to show creation, right? I mean, that's
Yeah.
what you've done.
Yeah, that's what.
You use science to disprove. And the problem I have with so many Christians is most Christians who accept evolution do not agree with that. It's been my experience.
Yeah.
Catholic Church embraces it.
But again, I know a lot of science, more than your average doctor, because I like it so much. And and you know, people say we're stupid scientifically if we believe in God. Well, there's a whole bunch of really good Christian scientists. In fact, many of the great discoveries scientifically in our world were made by Christian Bible quoting, preaching on the side scientists, including the MRI machine. And the greatest science that ever lived was probably, well, never mind, go ahead. We talked about Kelvin.
There is no discrepancy or conflict between the Bible and science.
Amen. Amen. In fact, I think the Bible takes a lot more faith to believe in evolution, because I showed you all these reasons it can't possibly be true, and to me than it does to have faith in God.
Have you heard about this new, fairly new, scientific concept called intelligent design? And it's
That's what I believe is
it's
intelligent.
pro-God. But
Intelligence.
there's a large and growing larger group of young qualified scientists
Yeah.
that are pushing the idea.
Intelligent
They
design.
call it intelligent design.
Amen. And there's another one that we hadn't talked about, is that some people actually believe that aliens came to Earth
Yeah.
and put the first life here.
Yeah.
Well, I sort of believe that. That alien was called Jehovah, the Creator.